This program is brought to you by Fortinet. Cybersecurity everywhere you need it.
Thank you so much for being with us here on Business Weekend. The spate of major cybercrimes that Australians have endured so far have been very much about ransomware and identity theft. In other words, hackers steal sensitive personal information, then threaten to release it unless a company or business pays a ransom. But there are greater dangers that needed to be guarded against, namely if hackers gain control of infrastructure, key infrastructure, then start turning things on or off. That's a big problem. Well, I spoke with Michael Murphy, who is Fortinet's Australian Head of Operational Technology and Critical Infrastructure.
So what we're identifying is that disruption leads to downtime, downtime leads to revenue loss, and revenue loss can lead to irreversible brand damage. And in many incidents within the critical infrastructure landscape, we don't necessarily have the luxury like in the IT enterprise where we can turn different levers to bring things back up online. It can take a considerable amount of time for OT.
Because you can already see in attacks that have taken place in other parts. And the US water system, where dams were basically hacked, attacked, and really, therefore, the control of those dams was under somebody else's control. That's where it becomes potentially dangerous for a community.
Absolutely. So what's front of mind for us right now is there are three different avenues where organisations are kind of focused. One is that they haven't been compromised and they're proactively planning for compromise. Two is they've had the compelling event and they're planning for the next event. And finally, organisations that have been compromised or alternatively are not aware of it.
I was going to say, there's the other thing. If you're not aware of it, this becomes beholden on company directors, on managers, but they're not IT experts. They can't actually go in and basically work out whether there is a hole in their security systems. So that's where there is a vulnerability in many company boards and in management.
Absolutely. So when we look at some of the statistics behind that, we've observed that with the new legislation that's come in Australia, the Security of Critical Infrastructure Act 2018, initially it was 4 critical sectors that were of concern. It's expanded to 11. And with those 11, we've seen that there's now mandatory reporting.
The one fact about this is that every company has got to at least prepare themselves for this. But there's another odd thing here. Most businesses imagine if they're hacked, that hackers want money. It's when hackers don't want money, they want control. That's when it becomes serious for a nation.
Absolutely. So what we've observed is in many incidents, there are motivators at play. Historically, it's been based on financial profiteering. We've seen an increase in socio and political influence. And more importantly, some hackers and some syndicates simply want to raise their own credibility within the landscape for on-sell.
Okay, so and there you break it into 3. There's those who want the money. So they can be backyard hackers from anywhere around the world having a go, trying to make some money.
Absolutely.
Big money for them, maybe small money for companies, who knows. The second lot are really state-sponsored hackers who may be seeking to have control. This is almost the modern warfare in some ways. If you think of the Dam Busters movie with the bouncing bomb and exploding the Ruhr Dam and all that sort of stuff during the Second World War, well, if you've got control through a computer, you can change the very course of a nation's economy.
Absolutely. And I think we need to take a moment to appreciate the time, energy and effort from our critical infrastructure owner and operators. Many of them have inherited these old legacy brittle systems that are subject to adverse change. And if they do go to upgrade a critical system, it can lead to that downtime that we can't afford. Which
means if you are upgrading your electricity system right now, your electricity grid, that you've got to be mindful of other parties trying to get inside that. That's the other one, isn't it?
Without question. And I think what we're seeing is our critical infrastructure is becoming increasingly interconnected, and that's never what these systems were designed for. They were designed to run in what's known as an air-gapped manner, so no internet connectivity. But suddenly, because of the way that we need to consume and the demand increasing, we need data in real time to make informed decisions. And ultimately, it's also a matter of competitive advantage as well.
OK, so there's the profiteers, there's the state-run sponsors. Then you mentioned another one, which I find interesting. Those people who have a philosophical bent, but they're also technologically literate. But they decide they don't like this form of energy generation. They decide they don't like that form of water supply, whatever it might be. And so they're aggrieved and they start to act. Again, companies have got to protect themselves against that.
Absolutely. And I think where we've seen great success in that area of building resilience into our critical infrastructure has come through the partnership of the private sector and the government working together in a collaborative manner. Otherwise, it's very difficult to share information and proactively get ahead of the threat landscape.
Because the threats, as I imagine, with artificial intelligence only increase, they don't decrease.
We see two key aspects behind the influence of artificial intelligence. One is the arms race between protection and defence. The second component of that is really opportunistic. We're looking at people that maybe don't have a high level of technical competency that are leveraging AI to build an action plan for how they can compromise assets with very little knowledge.
But the reality is that whether you're running a company big or small, a government department, an overall government, you've got to be conscious of this because it could be your organisation that's hacked that makes the whole nation vulnerable.
Without question, and that's a strong initiative for the Australian government to pay particular attention, especially through the Critical Infrastructure Act, and we're seeing that's further expanding. We've also seen that the Australian government has a very strong position that they want to become the most secure nation or cyber secure nation by 2030, which I think is certainly an objective we need to accomplish.
And therefore, that's going to bring along a lot of small, medium-sized and larger businesses that may not be well equipped at this stage, even though they might be running some form or be a part of some form of critical infrastructure.
Without question, and it also asks the question or begs the question around if everything is critical, what is critical? And if we lean again on the Australian Bureau of Statistics, those figures around 2 in every 10 businesses have been exposed to some form of cyber attack. We've seen 34% of organisations that have lost time actually addressing that cyber attack. 18% has demonstrated that there's service downtime, and more importantly, the figure around lack of productivity, which is again 17%.
And that is going to be the absolute key because clearly shareholders and other investors are not going to be particularly happy, as we've already seen, if a company is exposed in this way. Michael Murphy, many thanks for your time on the program.
Thank you.